Hi again. I'm Cordell Anderson, your guide in this trip number 7 to Jackson Park in the Crow Basin, which I entitle Wow, Saw It, Survived It, What Next? Well, we're talking here about a fascinating area that just intrigues me. No trails, very isolated, remote, very mysterious, 9 to 10 lakes, and so I just decided I had to try and get there. This would be my second attempt. Um, but I drove out, of course, through into the Uinta Basin, stopped in at the Duchesne Ranger Station to talk to Sheila and Lori and get up to date information. And then I continued north through the sagebrush country that's on the south of the Uintas up to Mountain Home. From there, I went on to the Yellowstone turnoff and headed east on a dirt road, crossing Lake Fork that you see here now, and then on to the Yellowstone Creek that you see here, and then a little bit further on, past that bridge, you come to the Dry Gulch Road and you turn east and go about 5 miles. Uh, Looking for Jeep Road 120, and from there you turn north, and some of it's pretty nice. This looks great. It's grassy road, and eventually it becomes very, very rough, and too rough for my small SUV, and so I stopped to get ready to hike. Well, I was getting ready to backpack. I, of course, was determined to go extremely lightweight, so I just took my little tiny Pentax waterproof camera. In fact, all the pictures from this whole slideshow were taken with this little camera, so you'll get an idea as to how good these little cameras are. Uh, and then my basic pack was very light, only weighed 7 pounds. My rain gear was a really cheap set that I bought here a year or so ago to try it out. Kind of bulky but extremely lightweight. Foot gear, of course, if you know my history, you know that I've had really incredible problems with my feet and ankles. In fact, I was told, 15, 16 years ago, to just forget backpacking. But I found a way to make it work. And then in the last couple of years, I've used extremely lightweight foot gear and don't need the ankle support anymore. And on this trip, I was going to go with my mountain running shoes, and they really work great. Of course, I use very good socks, including blister-proof socks. Of course, emergency gear includes my spot tracker. You don't want to go without one of these, at least one in a group, and let people know every day where you're at so that if something happens, they'll know where to start looking. And so you got to have a spot tracker. And then, of course, I have the satellite phone, which I use to call to KSL Outdoors Radio every Saturday morning, and of course, if in case of an emergency. But that satellite phone always goes with me. So here I was up the trail. I didn't go very far that first day. I made a camp, and then I was kept on the next day. Of course, heading to Crow Basin. First getting to Jackson Park, and then hoping that from Jackson Park I could find a way down into the canyon. And so up the Jeep Road I went, eventually getting to the barriers. Um, and as from that point on, it's closed to ATVs. Thanks be to the Lord, and because I hate those things. Sorry about that. But so up the trail I went, eventually but you were going up a ridge, looking down here to the left into the Yellowstone Canyon. And there was no water. There's no water at all along there, and I was out of water by this time, and so I was looking forward to where the trail crossed a stream. Well, I got to it, but a dry stream bed completely, and I thought, well, if this is what comes out of Jackson Park, I'm not going to find water there either. And so I was very curious about what the heck I was going to do. But I eventually got up into the park, and it was green and nice flowers, and eventually I found a small stream and was able to fill up with the water that I needed. So from here you see on the map where there's the dry creek, and then where I got the water, and then headed up through Jackson Park, which is a beautiful, beautiful grass meadow area. full of wildflowers, and as you go up, you sometimes look back, of course, on the Uinta Basin, and then you look forward um, towards actually towards Mount Emmons, which is further up this same ridge. Mount Emmons is the fourth highest peak in Utah, for 13,440 feet, and looking west towards Swayze Hole. But I kept going up. And got up. I didn't get all the way up to the end of the park, but I decided, okay, now's about the point where I'll go over to the edge and look down into Crow Canyon and see if I can get down in there somehow. And of course, over there's a lot of down timber, and on the edge I could look down to the south and I could see a little water, and it happens to be DG1, and then I moved along a little bit further and was able to see Crow Lake over through the trees. But it's way down in, and a very, very steep drop down in with a lot of down timber. And this is the kind of country I would have a very, very hard time getting through. And so I wasn't about to go down into there. But here you see the lake, Crow Lake, and Flat Top Mountain, 12,194 feet. But about this time, it was time for me to set up camp, and I didn't have any water. I was out again, and there was no water up here, and so I had to go way back down Jackson Park, and eventually found where the water originates, a spring. And near there was in that little area, there's a sign, the only sign that I saw in this whole area, Jackson Park Trail, and then the bottom part saying that it's 13 miles to Timothy Lakes. So I set up my little camp. You can see my lightweight equipment that I use, and my fire making this year has been extremely easy by using a fire making paste. You can buy a tube of it like at Sportsville Warehouse, and then windproof matches that keep burning no matter what the wind, and they keep burning long enough to get a fire going. But I got my little fire going to cook up my scalloped potatoes, and mixed my eggnog, an instant chocolate pudding, and some wheat thins, and that would be my dinner. And you can see the next morning that I left no trace where I had the little fire and where I had my camp set up, and then I went up all the way up Jackson Park to the very end, and looking, of course, along the way over into Swayze Hole again. And while I was resting there, all of a sudden I saw elk starting to move out into the open, and one bull was just grazing along and getting closer and closer, and eventually he running back towards all of his buddies. From there I went up to the end and followed a faint trail that went down past Critter's Bones that didn't make it, where I was going down a gradual slope, grassy slope, with Flat Top Mountain perfectly framed, and I thought this is going to be great, just walking down this little grassy meadow, into Crow Basin. Well, all of a sudden I was stopped by these cliffs, and I was hoping to at least be able to see and photograph from a distance all the lakes there, but looking down I could see DG1, but the cliffs and the boulder fields, and then looking in the middle area, the same thing, and then looking up, I couldn't see any lakes, but I thought, well, I'll climb up as high as I can get, and so I left my pack. You'll notice that I was clipped on my belt, my spot tracker. You don't want to ever be separated from it, and this was my trail through boulder fields. I was going up there, and eventually got up there where I could see a few lakes, and in this picture indicates where all of them are, and this is the middle section with Flat Top Mountain, and then looking down to Crow Lake, and then all the way down to DG1, but you can see there's just no way that this old guy was going to go down into that area. Besides, it started raining, and so I hustled back to my pack and got over under the cover of some trees, and it just kept going and getting worse, and it was hail, and all of a sudden it was turning really cold, and so I remembered my experiences hypothermia, and so I decided I've got to keep moving, and so I moved out from the cover to put my poncho on, threw it back over my pack, and in the process I lost my balance, which hasn't been very good in recent years, and I went backwards over some down timber, and my left ankle got caught in the roots, and then I went backwards, hanging over this log with my pack weight and my weight all on my ankle that was being bent to the point where I didn't think it could have. There's no way it could have survived not breaking. Um, and so I was just hanging there and flailing around, and finally wiggled out of my pack, and was able to grab a root or two, and was able to get up on there and finally free my ankle, and it was not broken. Thanks be to the Lord again. I don't know how it withstood it, except that I believe the supplements that I have been taking for years and the conditioning that I have focused on had my body, my legs, my muscles, my tendons, etc., strong enough to be able to withstand that tremendous weight of going over this log, and so anyway, I'm grateful that I survived that, and I would suggest that you check out all these supplements. You can learn about this whole history of mine in the article section of my website, where entitled "Where do I get my energy?" But the rain really kept coming down, and so I was. But by then, of course I was had my rain gear on. I was moving up, and all of a sudden the lightning and thunder hit, and the lightning and thunder would hit at the same instant. It was just right on top of me, and there were sparks, electricity just jumping all around me, and so I kept under this lower trees, and I moved along the edge of Jackson Park, keeping in the tree line, but in the lower trees, not the higher ones. And so I moved down, and finally the storm let up, and I was able to take my rain gear off and move down the trail. But then a tremendous storm was on my tail the whole way, all the way down to the car. In fact, I didn't quite get there in time. 200 yards from the car, I had to put the poncho back on. I'm grateful for having seen what I went after and survived it, and so I headed down the road. Got some food in Duchesne. It was late. I was very tired, and so when I got up in the Strawberry area, I stopped to camp for the night. And from there, I made my call to KSL Outdoors and Tim Hughes and Navi and all the crew the next morning. Russ wasn't part of it that morning, but it's Russ Smith that I get the telephone or the sat phone from, and so I'm grateful for him. But so here I am. It's become harder in recent years for me. I'm going on 76, and I sometimes think about Forrest Gump, and when he was running around the country for 3 years, and like I have been going 9 years in this unit thing, backpack now 1,500 miles, and I remember him when he all of a sudden, with his little following behind him, he just stopped and he turned around and he looked at them. Well, someone said, quiet, he's going to say something, and so he said, I'm pretty tired. I think I'll go home now. Well, I have had my Forrest Gump moments a number of times, and I did this year too. But then again, I remember back the slideshow that I made a number of years ago that's on my website, entitled "The Challenge: Never Give In, Never, Never, Never." Well, and I think about the Crow Basin, and I have looked at the Google Earth and the topographical maps, and I think I can get down in there, but I think I've got to take it from lower Jackson Park, not upper Jackson Park, and so I have it all figured out how that what might just be one trip next year, it will be to accept the challenge of getting to Crow Basin finally. Of course, I'll throw out the challenge to all of you young bucks out there. If any of you can get there first and will send me a report and some good pictures, I'll put it on my website. But so let's just all keep going, doing the best we can. Okay? Thanks a lot.